Hello everybody, Bradley here, and welcome into a Civilization 6 tier list video. What the? 6 or 7 months ago, just as the New Frontier Pass was kicking off, a more inexperienced version of myself did a tier list like the one you're about to watch. Basically, I went through all of the wonders in Civilization 6, not the natural wonders, all of the built wonders, and I ranked them. We had tiers S through to F, and I just ranked them and gave my thoughts, and that video was great, and we all had a good time. But since then, since that video's old and opinions have changed, new wonders have been added into the game, things are a little bit different, I've been getting a lot of people recently commenting like, hey, I watched your wonder video, and what you're saying now is completely different to what you said back then. And I was like, oh boy, we should probably redo this. So here we are. Before we start with our next tier list, our second version of this, post the New Frontier Pass, post the April update, post all of that fun stuff, let's talk about
the rules.
The first thing to know, number one, is that I play this game on deity. My opinions are formed as a person who plays this game on deity, which would be different than forming my opinions on another difficulty. This isn't to trash on anyone who plays on a difficulty that isn't deity. It's just to explain how my opinions came to be. So if you play this game on another difficulty, you might have better access to wonders. You might have better situations that pop up more often to use wonders. So just keep in mind, if what I'm saying isn't really vibing with your experience, it might just be that our experiences in the game are different. Rule number 2, I try my best to balance how I value things. If I value getting an extra policy card slot with one wonder, I try and value it just as much with the next wonder that gives me a policy card slot. Same with placement, right? If a wonder has a difficult placement and I give it a lower grade because of that, I try and value that lower placement in another wonder the same way. One thing to keep in mind is no wonders are equal. You have to value things differently. And a lot of the comments I was getting were things like, hey, you said this wonder sucked because of how hard it is to place, but you made this really hard to place wonder in the A tier. You're a person. And I was like, okay, cool. But I have to value things differently depending on the wonder. There are other considerations when it comes into the game, what the effect is it gives you. So just understand, I might sound like I'm contradicting myself. These are just like in my brain what I think when we get into the game. Now that we understand that I will try not to contradict myself, although it might just happen as I evaluate certain things with different wonders, let's go on to rule number 3. Rule number 3, and the last rule before we get started, is that I'm going to try to rank these wonders based on the overall experience of Civ, not just on deity. So if I put a wonder that's really hard to get on deity in the S tier, it's because most people don't play this game on deity. I will try and differentiate when that happens. But since most people don't play this game on deity and most people who watch the channel are kind of growing with Civ, I don't want to rank a really good wonder for you poorly and encourage you not to build it, because in your games on Prince or King, it might be the best wonder for you to build every game. So I'm going to try and take all difficulties into account when I make these rankings. And finally, I'm going to ask you to use your just noggins a little bit here. Instead of doing letters, I decided to try and put words in this little slot here to make it a little easier to follow. So instead of doing an S tier, we have a would build in every game if I could tier. That way, if I put something in there, instead of coming in and yelling at me, like, you said that you wouldn't build, you can just read here and it goes, would build in every game if I could. And that's just my opinion. The left side is just a really brief opinion on it, regardless of what else I say. So would never build is really bad. Would build in every game if I could in all caps is really good. And everything falls in between. If you need letters though, and that's how you work best, that is all good. That's how more tier lists, or most tier lists, are done. S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, F tier. Let's rock and roll. We are starting at the top with the Alhambra. Now, the Alhambra is not a wonder I build often. It's not a wonder I can build often. It does do a lot of good things for you. Comes early in the game, gives you some amenities, which is helpful because it's a really war-based wonder, so it helps with that war weariness a little bit. What does it give us? It gives us great general points. You get that extra military policy slot, which is awesome. So from what I remember of the Alhambra and what the wiki is telling me here, I think this is a good wonder. It's not really achievable on deity just because of how early it comes and how niche it is. You have to be going for a domination victory. It's got to be on hills next to an encampment, so building it can be a little tricky sometimes. Where does it come in the tech tree here? It comes in at castles, so it comes in at it's not really awkward, but it's a little awkward. And so I think the Alhambra is good. I think what it gives you is very good for the niche that it's in. I don't think it's something I would build every game, but if I was just playing random games of Civ for fun, I'd say this is an occasional build. Would it? Nah, I wouldn't consider it in most games, but this is an occasional build for me. I like the Alhambra a lot. A Munson Scott is one of those wonders that comes so late in the game that by the time you get it, you've probably either won or lost. I believe it gives you 20% science and 10% production in all cities. Heck yeah, I got that right. It's all up here, baby. It's all on the big noggin. So if you are at the end of a game, you're struggling a little bit, and you can get that extra 20% science, 10% production in all your cities to help you get through those projects at the end of a space race, I think it's really good. There are some Tundra bits and pieces to it as well. Most games that you play in Civ where you're going really, really wide, which is a Civ 6 strategy that most people go for, I think this is an occasional build as well. I would build this occasionally. The situation never really matches up, but like the Alhambra, the niche it's in is really good for what it does. It's just you don't need what it does all that often, but it's an occasional build for me. What I dislike most about the Angkor Wat, and it bothers me so much, it gives you housing and population for all the cities in your empire. The problem with that is when you build it, I believe it comes in the medieval era, you just don't have a lot of cities, so it kind of counteracts itself. It encourages you to build it later to get the most out of it, but it comes early in the game. The only thing I will say for the Angkor Wat is that the AI don't tend to rush it. Like, you can wait for that extra city or two. I would never build this thing. Maybe like they're in the occasional game as a Khmer where you're like all at the end of the game that like it hasn't been built. You have an aqueduct down that you can put it next to. I just would never build. I'm sure there's a situation out there in the world where you could build it. I just never would. The Apodona is going to be the first wonder in these top 3 slots. Comes early in the game, easy to build. Gives you those 2 great work slots, which is awesome. Gives you a couple envoys early on for the early Sus if you find Brussels or Kabul or whatever city-state you're looking for. I think this is great. I wouldn't actively put an effort in most games. I would at least consider it in most games. The one thing the Apodona does have, and I would push it up a little forward, and maybe by the end I'll think about it depending on what I end up putting here. But the Apodona is usually pretty easy to build, and the AI doesn't usually rush it, so you can kind of get it later in the game, which is awesome. So you don't need it right away, and I think that's a huge benefit of it, is it has that flexibility. So I'm gonna put the Apodona, and I'd at least consider it in most games for sure. Big Ben takes a little bit of setup. The great merchant points are kind of whatever. The gold is kind of whatever. That economic policy slot, though, is amazing. I would actively put an effort into the Big Ben in most of my games. I value that economic policy card slot so highly, and this is where people are typically like, whoa, but for the Alhambra, it has a policy card slot, and you didn't value it that highly. I just value the economic policy slot more than the military policy slot, and that's just the difference. The Big Ben is fantastic. Takes a little bit of setup with the commercial hub and the river and all that, but hey, Big Ben's great. I would actively put an effort into it in most games. Biosphere is one of those wonders that's actually kind of good if you get the most out of it, but it's got to be on a river next to a neighborhood, and that's kind of weird. And the effects you get out of it, it's kind of like the Amundsen Scott. By the time you get the Biosphere and get to make the most out of it, you've already won or you've already lost. It's more about speed and efficiency at that point. And for that, I really like the Biosphere and what it does for your methods of getting power into your empire. And so I do think I'm going to put the Biosphere in the occasional build section. Someone didn't even go through the work of taking the transparent background. Anyways, I'm gonna put the Biosphere in occasional build. I'd occasionally build it. It's better than I just might build it for fun once, but I don't think it's better than the occasional build. But like these two, it has a niche, and if you can get that niche, it's good, and I would build it. To be quick with Bolshoi, it is great. I would at least consider it in most of my games. Gives you the writer and musician points, give you the writer and musician slots. Pretty easy to build. AI doesn't rush it often. Bolshoi, I would at least consider in most games. Broadway is pretty much a later game, more beefed up Bolshoi. One of the things I didn't mention from the Bolshoi is actually the free civics that you get. It's the same with Broadway. I believe you get one free, like, Atomic Era Civic or something. The requirements to build it, flat land next to a theater square, pretty easy to do. The one thing with Broadway is you have to be a little careful which city you put it in, because it does give you 20% culture in the city that you put it in. I would say, though, in most games, I would actively put an effort in. I think it is a little bit better than Bolshoi, and I think it's usable enough in most games that I think it's up at maybe not quite Big Ben quality, but above Bolshoi for sure. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and put it in, actively put an effort into. Casa is one of those wonders that's on a huge come up for me. You get governors, you get bonuses in cities on separate continents. It does have the same kind of niche feeling as the occasional build wonder so far. I think the governors are very useful in most games. Casa is one that's been rising for me lately. Twitch chat keeps bringing it up in a lot of games, and I keep going, oh yeah, the Casa would be great to build. So I wouldn't say I actively put an effort into it in most games, but I would at least consider it in most games for sure. So Casa is going to go here, although I do think someone could convince me to put it up a little higher. I I've seen maybe 1 or 2 good Chichen Itzas in the entirety of my experience playing, watching anything of Civ 6. It's just not a feasible wonder to build. It's really hard to get going. The amount of rainforest you need is lame because it takes away from the chops. I don't know. I would never build this thing. I have never built the Chichen Itza. I don't think I would ever build the Chichen Itza. I know it's probably a little bit better than this, but I just don't like it, so it's going here. Coliseum. Hey, we just did a video on that. Another wonder that is on the rise recently. If it didn't have the requirement to be next to a few other cities, I would put it in the top, the S tier here. I think someone could convince me that the Coliseum does belong in the S tier. I think the early entertainment complex you got to put down takes away from it a little bit. I do think that needing a few nearby cities to get the maximum benefit doesn't always work out. I'm going to take a few points off as well for the AI loving to build this thing and rushing it pretty consistently. So you really have to be on your game to grab it. So I'm going to put it in the actively put an effort into. If I can get the Coliseum in almost every game, I will, but I don't think it's quite at like I am gunning for it every time. Colossus, I think I put this in the F tier last time. I think I put all the ocean wonders in the F tier last time. The one thing that Colossus does have that I probably didn't appreciate, and I can't remember where I put it, I'm going to put it in the occasional build. I do build the Colossus occasionally. I usually only build it at the end of a game if I just want the trade route slot. I don't typically build it in a coastal city like early on in the game. I don't think it's useless. I don't think I would just build it once for fun. I don't think it's a never build, but I think it's barely meeting the occasional build standard. Crystal Redentor, really helpful in a culture game. Doubles up your seaside resort tourism, I believe. Also gives your kind of holy relics a little bit more tourism, but I do think it's in the occasional build category. Mainly only build it in a culture victory when I'm trying to kind of speed things up or make sure my religious tourism doesn't get bamboozled by the enemy, but it's an occasional build. It's a good wonder. It's tourism from relics and holy cities. I had that in my brain and it came out as like holy relics or some, but that's what I meant. It doesn't change my analysis. I just said things wrong and I'm sorry. It's going in occasional build. Eiffel Tower is one of those wonders that was so good, and then Earth Goddess got nerfed, and I don't know if I've built it since the Earth Goddess nerf, and that makes me really sad. I at least consider it in most games. In most games, when I get around to the point where I need to rush the Eiffel Tower, I go, that would be interesting. So I do at least consider it in most games. There are loads of times where the appeal would be helpful, mostly in culture games. Getting appeal to every tile in your empire can be really great, especially if you have Earth Goddess in culture games. You're going to be looking for national parks, you're going to be looking for seaside resorts. All of that is appeal based. So I think in almost every culture game I would look to build it. I was probably up in one of these two the last time. I think I'm moving it down a little bit. The Earth Goddess nerf does hurt it just ever so slightly, but I would at least consider it in most games. And the games where you do build it and it works, it's fantastic. Estadio's like the reverse Angkor Wat, where it gives you culture, culture and amenities for each city in your civilization. It does have some weird requirements with entertainment complexes and stadiums and stuff to build. By the time you get Estadio, though, you've probably already unlocked stadiums. It's not a huge leap. It's more like if you have an entertainment complex with a stadium, can you build Estadio? And I think, oh boy, where do I put this? Because entertainment complexes have gotten better and I've been building more, so the Estadio's been more of an option more often. I'm gonna have a think about this one. I'm so torn because its benefits are per city, but it's just every city in your empire. Most Civ strats play wide though, so the amount of cities is not really a problem. And by the time you get to Estadio, you have a couple cities with high production that aren't really doing anything. So it's never really an issue. I mean, those cities do need the entertainment complex with the stadium though, so you are limited in which city you can build it in. I'm really torn between these two. I could go either way. I'm gonna go would at least consider in most games. I think I would at least consider it in most games. I can't remember the last time I actively put an effort into Estadio though, so I don't think it's fair to move up. It is a quality wonder. It's gotten better recently with the entertainment complex tier up a little bit. It's gotten better, so I think here's a fair place for it, although I am torn between the two. Hello everybody, post-production Bradley here. I've just been notified by our editor Onvars that I am a idiot and I did not record a rating for the Eteminki in this video, and that will not stand. The Eteminki, being new to the game, was not in my little drag and drop thingy that I had, and I scrolled past it on the wiki. Again, I'm a raging moron. The Eteminki is an occasional build wonder. You need the marsh, you need the floodplains. When it works, it really works. It's definitely better than never build. It is something that we actually made the centerpiece of a game of Civilization before because it can be that good when it's on. Mostly you need the map for it, or you need to set up on a wetlands map to really make it work. So slightly better than never build. build. Definitely something that I would occasionally build, but certainly never more than occasionally. But I don't want anyone to leave this with the impression that it's not potentially a like game busting wonder for you in the way you can set up your game. So it goes from all the way F tier to all the way S tier depending on your map, and it lands on occasional build overall. I mean, Forbidden City with the wildcard policy slot, what more needs to be said? If you can grab this in your games, I would grab it. Would I put it in the would build every game if I could? That would be a shift. I know I didn't put it up there last time. That wildcard policy slot, though, is nuts. I'm moving it up. I'm putting the Forbidden City up here. This, I know it's a change from my last ratings. I can't remember where I had it last time. The wildcard policy slot is so helpful, and you get the Forbidden City early enough in the game that wildcard policy slot just offers you so much flexibility that I can't not put it out. I would build it in every game if I could. I would absolutely build it in every single game if I could, so I think it's fair to put it in the would build in every game if I could category. Golden Gate Bridge, look, we don't even need to know what it does or where, like, it's just so hard to build and so lame, and it never feels good, and every time I built it, I'm like, cool, this is great, whatever. I have built it once for fun, so I'm going to put it in the might build for fun once category. It's just like a fun wonder to build at the end of the game. If you're basing your game around the Golden Gate Bridge, I think you're doing it wrong. It's just, I know there's a lot of requirements and it does give you a lot of stuff. I just don't think it's very good on the whole. The Great Bath is an interesting wonder because I can never get it on deity, so I don't remember the last time I built the Great Bath, but it's one of those wonders that it kind of creates a dam for you well before you can even get dams, which is really helpful. It gives you little bonuses every time the river floods. It does make early floodplain settles really, really good. I think it's a pretty good wonder, like certainly better than Hanging Gardens. And I think if I was playing on Prince or King, I would get this in a lot of games. I would at least consider in most games. It really depends on your start and whether you need it or not. But I think if you have a huge floodplain settle, it's so good. I think it has its niche, but I think it's better than these ones. And I think I would at least consider it in most games. The early housing and amenity too is very nice. Yeah, I'm going to put it in here just because the floodplains are such a big requirement, but it's one of those things that can turn a really bad early city with floodplains into a really good early city with floodplains, and there's very few wonders that work the map like that, so I'm going to put Great Bath up here. On another day, I might move it up a little bit higher. If you get a really good one, it's fantastic. I don't think it's quite this quality, though. I'm going to leave it down here. This is fair. This is where I'm sitting with the Great Bath. The Great Library is fantastic. I would at least consider it in most games, and I do consider it in most games. The requirements are easy enough to build next to a campus and all of that stuff. What is it? Next to a campus, a flat land adjacent to a campus with a library, no problem at all. I think its yields on the whole are a little low, though. You know, 2 science, 1 great scientist point per turn. You do get all of the ancient and classical era boosts, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah, that is the boost to all that. So some of those boosts are a little bit tricky. I find overall, usually what you get to be a little on the low side, but it's something I'd rather have than not have. And especially in a science win, I do find the great writer slots to be a little awkward in some games. But if I was playing on a lower difficulty, I'd certainly look to build it in more games than I do on deity. So I don't want to like trash it. I think the Great Library, I'd at least consider it in most games. The Great Lighthouse is something that I never build. It's bad. It's just bad. The +1 movement for all naval units is good. I don't know. I just don't like it. I think it's bad. I can't remember the last time I built the Great Lighthouse and felt good about it. I can't remember the last time I took over a Great Lighthouse and felt good about it. I just don't like it. It's just, no. No. The Great Zimbabwe is interesting because I think it's really, really good. Gold, great merchant points. Great merchant points are kind of whatever, but monopolies and corporations make that better. Gives you the trade route. Yeah, it gives you 1 trade route, makes those trade routes a little bit better. The problem is it needs to be next to a commercial hub and cattle. What on earth? I might build it once for fun. How often does that happen where you can build the Great Zimbabwe in a city with like high production that has a commercial hub next to cattle? What the? Why? MCA. Moving on. People always tell me I say this one wrong, so I'm going to say it super wrong. Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia is great if you have a religion. You can't even build it without a religion, so I'm going to put it in the occasional build. I don't think it's a bad wonder. I think it's fine. You just need a religion, though, and I don't have a religion often on deity, but on lower difficulties, you will get a religion more often. So if I was playing on lower difficulties and had religion more often, I would occasionally build it. Also, for a religious victory, 1 extra spread on all missionaries and all apostles is pretty nuts. Like, it's a good wonder, and if you could build it, I guess it wouldn't matter because you need a religion for the spread store. I'm keeping it here. I'm trying to talk myself into moving it higher. I'm keeping it here. It's occasional build. Hanging Gardens is one of those wonders that sounds really good, but in practice isn't very good, but I don't think it's terrible, so I'm gonna put it in the might build for fun once. Growth in all cities is nothing too shabby at all. A little bit of housing, I believe. Yeah, it gives you a little bit of housing, a little bit of lifespan on the heroes. Like I said, I don't think it's terrible. I think it just sounds better than it is, and there are better early wonders to go for. So I might build it for fun once, but I don't think it's really bad. Hermitage is definitely an occasional build for me, especially in a culture victory. It has this function of just providing more great art slots, and you can never have enough great art slots. And what I like about building the Hermitage is there, or the Hermitage, or however the you say it, is that I can then build like 1 or 2 extra archaeological museums, which helps kind of spread out my culture base in a game, which I really like. So in a culture victory, not every culture victory, but when I do build the Hermitage, I really like what it does for me in my games. And so I'm going to throw it here. Occasional build. Huey is trying to make lakes great again. The problem is Huey very infrequently make lake. I just never build this thing. I might build it for fun once because it's like memey. I'm gonna move it up. It's not straight trash. You gotta have the lakes for it. Even then, it only mildly makes the lakes good. The amenities you get for it aren't overly helpful because you need a big lake to put it in. And I just don't know. It's just not great. I need to test this too. I think the amenities go to the city that built the Huey, which isn't even ideal. If the amenities got spread out throughout your empire, kind of like the luxury resource amenities do, and they just got spread out to where it was needed, that'd be nicer, but nah, it's going here. Jebel Barkal, man, I never build it. I don't really know what's up with it. I think the 4 faith for cities within 6 tiles, it has this Coliseum effect. It needs to be built on desert hills though, and I don't know how often I have a bunch of cities within 6 tiles of a desert hills tile. I might build this for fun once, although in lower difficulties, I think this could be quite good and very fun. If I was still playing the game on Prince or King, I think I'd move it up to occasional build. I could have a lot of fun with this. The early iron is really nice, especially in domination. You can just start pumping out swordsmen like no tomorrow. I think this might be a little better when it's good, but I think overall for me, I might just build it for fun once. But again, it's one of those that I don't think is terrible. Kilwa Kisawani, so good, baby, so good. Pretty much anytime you have 2 city-states that you've used that are the same type, Kilwa immediately becomes such a good wonder to have. I actively put an effort into this in most of my games. There are very few games where I'm rolling in the city. If I have lots of envoys and I'm doing a lot with the city-states, I'm almost always looking to build Kilwa. I don't think it's quite up here because there are those games where you just don't quite have the envoys, or you have a bunch of economic city-state sues and you're going for a science victory and it's not always the best or the most optimized. But I think overall, this is definitely in that A tier, like the actively put an effort into tier. Kotaku Inn is in the Kotaku bin because this thing is trash. I mean, look, 20% faith in this city, cool, whatever. And then it gives you warrior monks, cool, whatever. Like, just no, don't build. Like, I'm never building it. I don't encourage it. But if you like it, have fun. Machu Picchu, man, give me that wood build in every game if I could. The Machu Picchu, along with the city-state Mohenjo-Daro, are like 2 things in Civ 6 that can completely change how you play the game. Being able to get industrial zone adjacencies without building dams or aqueducts, theater square adjacencies without building wonders or entertainment complexes, and more commercial hub adjacencies is so good. There are very few games where you don't have enough mountains to make it cool. This thing is pretty impossible to get on deity, but if I could build this, I would build it in every game. It's so efficient, so good. Just definitely in that S tier. I love it. Mabodi Temple's interesting because in terms of functionality, in terms of its ability, this is where I'm going to contradict myself a little bit, because in terms of how often I would build it, it's an occasional build because I can only build it occasionally when I have a religion, which isn't often. But getting those 2 free apostles, you can either do 2 things with that. You can either evangelize your religion for free, saving you about 800 faith buying those apostles, or you can use those apostles, immediately promote them, and defend your religion in your empire. If you're using it, it is absolutely incredible. So it doesn't really fit because it's better than occasional build for sure in terms of its ability when you need it, but I would at least consider it, and like it's one of those where these tiers don't really have a place for the Mabodi Temple. So I realize in most games Hermitage might be better and all that. I'm gonna put it here. I know you can swap these in and out. I know I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but I really like the Mabodi Temple when I get a religion. It's fantastic. Mausoleum at Halicarnassus. Not a lot of things in Civilization 6 can really make ocean tiles better. Now they have to be coastal tiles. In most games, I have a city with enough coastal tiles for this to be worth it. Most cities with coastal tiles, you're building the harbor anyway because you want your harbor kind of district buildings to make the ocean tiles and the coastal tiles better. I think this is a would at least consider in most games. I think it's a fantastic wonder. I don't actively put an effort into it. The big thing here is I'm often building it in cities that aren't my first couple of cities, and so it usually kind of falls by the wayside. By the time I get it, it's not in a super powerful, super effective city, or I might move it up a little bit, but otherwise I would at least consider it in most games. Much like the Mabodi Temple, Meenakshi Temple is fantastic if you are in a religious victory. Pretty much just superpowers your gurus, makes them cheaper to purchase, makes it so if they're next to your religious units or they're your apostles or whatever, they're getting extra religious strength in combat, which is just amazing. I think this is an occasional build. I don't think it's quite as effective as the Mabodi Temple, but overall I think it's a great wonder to get if you're going for a religious victory. I would go for it every time. So occasional build for me just because I don't often get a religion, but if I had a religion in a lot of games, I might move it up here with the Mabodi Temple. Mont Saint Michel, Mont Saint Michael, I don't know how to say it. I'd never build this thing. I've never built this thing. I don't care for this thing. Abilities are weird. Placement is weird. It's weird. I'm weird. We're all weird a little bit. We're watching a Civ 6 tier list video, so it's just going down here. Would never build.
Hello, hi, is this the police? Yeah, this is the police. I've called the right number. This is the police call operating center. Yeah, I'd like to report a crime because the Oracle has stolen my heart.
It is my favorite wonder in the game. I think it's in contention for the best wonder in the game. I would build this in every game. I think I do build this in most games. Super easy to build early, just needs to go on hills. Most of your high production cities can go on hills. It's super flexible, super effective. I made a whole video about the Oracle that might pop up on screen somewhere. Maybe just Google it, VB Van Bradley Oracle video. We did a whole tutorial on it. It's amazing. It's fantastic. It's S tier. I would build it in every game. It is my heart, my soul, and my life. Orskaz, a wonder that has a good ability that it's just not functional all the time. Super specific if you're making a Diplo favor push. I don't know, man. It's good when it's like, it's one of those things that I never build it because you never need it, but it's actually okay. Industrial era, I'm just reading it because I never build it, so I gotta check it. Industrial era, that's fine. For culture, the 100% diplomatic favor per turn from starting a turn as the suzerain of a city-state. 100% diplomatic favor per turn is huge in a lot of games. There's a lot of games where I make it a lot. I should actually consider this more because I use my Diplo favor pretty liberally to sell to the AI and to buy great works off of. I'm betraying myself here because I originally would never build this, but I'm talking myself into it. Occasional build. I'm going for occasional build. When you read it, it's cool. I like it. Oxford University is kind of like the Broadway and Bolshoi theater thing, except for it's the better version of the Great Library. The main thing I like that's different is the 20% science in the city. I think this is a very, very effective wonder in a science victory. Takes a little bit of planning. I believe it needs to be on a flatland, grass, or plains tile next to a mountain with a campus, but most campuses are next to mountains. It's not the weirdest. It sounds complicated, but it's not like the Great Zimbabwe with the cattle and the commercial hub and all that. I would actively put an effort into it in most games. I think it's really good. Panama Canal. I would never build it, but I built it twice recently just for fun in like a meme way. So I can't in good conscience move it down here, but it's really bad. We're gonna move it up here. It's not a good wonder. The Petra. If you've got the desert, it takes an unusable city and makes it incredible. If you don't got the desert, it's really pointless. And so it's one of those, it's either amazing or it's either terrible. I at least consider it in most games. In most games, you have a big swath of desert. You're like, hey, I can't really settle there, but would I build the Petra? And that's enough for me. I think it's a great wonder. It's a little too exclusive to use that I think it's not like right up there. I could be convinced to move it up though. Any wonder that turns a completely unusable city into an amazing city is very, very good. And I at least consider it in most games. In some games though, it's still not worth the effort to settle the desert. I'm talking myself into actively... I'm going to put it up here. This might be controversial. I don't know if it's better than some of these wonders just below it, but I think its ability to turn a terrible city and make it fantastic does offer enough flexibility that I can put it up in the A tier. I think I do I think this is fair. I think this is fair. Petra's going up here. Patala Palace, easy placement, hills next to mountains, I believe, which is awesome. Gives us culture, gives us faith, gives us that Diplo policy slot. All things we really, really love. I would at least consider this in most games. The green card, the Diplo policy slot, there are a few good early ones. It really kicks off later in the game, which is nice. I could talk myself into moving it up a little bit more as well. It is something that I consider in most of my games, which is great. Pyramids, S tier. I mean, it's the easiest S tier. It's that and Oracle for me, I think, are the two best wonders in the game. Early Wonder, the only thing I take away from it is it needs a flatland desert tile. Despite that, though, I really, really do enjoy going for it. Making every builder in your game better is super efficient. It just adds so much efficiency to your whole game because you get it so early, and that ability just starts working for you. It even gives you the free builder. So despite the fact that it has like a niche requirement in terms of where you can place it, despite the fact that the AI loves to build it as well, it is easily the tippy top of the S tier with the Oracle here. Ruhr Valley, I'd at least consider it in most games. I think in terms of ability here, it's one of those things, now I'm in a trap because I tried to set these up to make them more realistic, but even they fall short sometimes. I'm going to put it up in the A tier. The work it does for you in cities with high production, which you have because you're putting it next to an industrial zone. So the city you're building it in automatically has a decent amount of production most times. It needs to go next to a river. If you're next to a river, that means you usually have an aqueduct to put next to your industrial zone. So I just think functionality is great. It comes at a good time. You can usually build it before the AI. The ability is always welcome. You use production to build everything in the game. So I'm going to leave it in the actively put an effort into in most games tier. St. Basil's is good when it's really good and bad when it's really bad. I think overall the necessary tundra tiles lets it down a little bit. I'm gonna put it in the might build for fun once. In terms of how frequently I build it, I can't remember the last time I did build it though. Although if you are playing a Russia Faith game in the tundra, it can be much better than this. So it can function anywhere, kind of in any tier depending on the game. I think overall though, it's mostly I just build it for fun every once in a while. I will say though that food and production from tundra tiles is really, really nice. I will add that specifically food and production from tundra tiles is fantastic. So like I said, it can move up and down. Ordinarily though, in most games, I'm leaving it down here. The Statue of Liberty loyalty bonus kind of betrays it a little bit because if you're building it on the coast, you don't usually have too many cities within 6 tiles to make 100% loyal, but that is really helpful in some games. I think the 4 Diplo points isn't even that great, but what it does do is it helps you deny the diplomatic victory from the AI. The only time I really ever build this thing is if I'm either going for a Diplo victory, which isn't often, or I want to deny it from the AI. That's an occasional build. I think I build this thing pretty occasionally. I don't hate it when I do, so we're going to put it in occasional build. You can also just kind of build it in an off city that's out of the way. It's not a big deal. It's not interfering with your main cities. I think it's an occasional build. I think it's a fine wonder. Statue of Zeus, man, it's an occasional build, but good golly, Miss Molly, in a domination game, it's the efficiency from just getting so many units that you can just go, you can form your murder goon squad and just start rolling with it. It's very efficient. I think in terms of ability, it's up here. I just think I don't need it. Like there's so few times I need it, but I'm also playing the game on deity and I do have to remember that. Oh, would I build this more on lower difficulties? Would I build encampments more on lower difficulties? No, I wouldn't, because on lower difficulties, the AI build encampments less. So I'm going to go occasional build. But when it's good, it is good, baby. Stonehenge is a might build once for fun. On deity, it can be kind of helpful sometimes if you really just want to get that religion and you don't want the AI to take it. You can usually never build it on deity, and if you're not on deity and you're on lower difficulties, you don't often need to build it to get a religion. You can usually get the first one anyway just by doing normal faith stuff, so I don't think it's that valuable, and I just would never really build it. Sydney Opera House, very specific to great musicians, which is not my fave. By the time we get to the end of the game here, it's nice to have those great musician slots and you're continuing to earn great musicians. I usually find with the Sydney Opera House, though, I'm at a bottleneck with art slots by the time I get to this part of the game, and I need more art slots, not music slots. So it's an occasional build. I think in your culture wins, you can get it and it feels good, but you don't ever need the Sydney Opera House, is what I'm saying. Every game of Civ you ever play, you will never need the Sydney Opera House to win it. And I think that takes it out of the top 3 contention here. Although you could say that for a lot of, I guess you never need any wonders to win a game of Civ. But I just think its abilities are fine. It comes at a weird point for the ability it gives. They're welcome abilities, but they're not crucial to your victory. So I think occasional build is a good spot for this. Taj Mahal, it's on the come up for me recently. The value of having all of your historic moments, like all of your good historic moments getting better is just fantastic, especially if you're building loads of national parks. This will pretty much permanently keep you out of dark ages, which is a huge deal, especially as you go up the difficulties. I find that you can get this in most games. So while I think it's better than these, is it better than Big Ben though? Yeah, I think on the whole and on balance, it's better than Big Ben. I think this is a fair spot for it. I maybe should have put another tier here. I think this and Forbidden City would fill in this tier here, and it would leave Pyramids, Oracle, and Machu Picchu up top, but I think this is where it belongs. Getting that era score, fantastic. Keeping you out of Dark Age is fantastic. All stuff we want. Easy to build, easy build requirements. You can build it in lots of cities. AI doesn't usually rush it. All in all, would build in every game if I could, and do frequently build in most games. Temple of Artemis, if you got those early camps, man, there's very few games where I don't actively put an effort into it. We've been building the Toa in a lot of our games over the last couple months, immediately getting one early city that can get a few amenities, which is fantastic. That'll kind of help spread out your luxury resource amenities. So what happens with the amenities is the Toa giving you amenities is great. And when you get those luxury resources, the luxury resource amenities spread out to wherever you need them the most. So they'll spread to your newer cities that you're building instead of the city with the Toa that already has good amenities. So I think that's fantastic. I think it's an amazing wonder. Gives you that population too with the food and the housing. So all in all, just a fantastic wonder. I would actively put an effort into it in almost all games. Terracotta Army, one of those ones. It's good when it's good. It's bad when it's bad. If you got an army and you're building Terracotta Army, fantastic. You're going to get all those promotions. If you don't have an army, pretty bleh. It kind of sucks. So we're going to go occasional build. I'd occasionally build it, and so that's where it's going. Very niche ability on Terracotta Army, by the way. All archaeologists from the owner may enter foreign lands without open borders. Cool, I guess. What? Sure. Who's ever lost a game of Civ because their archaeologist couldn't enter? What? Like that's a niche ability. Cool, but like what? All right, the Tour de Belém is not in this little graphic thing, and I don't know how to add it. I have tried, I have saved the photo. The Tour de Belém is very interesting. If you have a lot of cities not on your original continent, it can be quite helpful. It also helps buff up your trade routes a little bit from the city with the Tour de Belém. I think I would put it in the occasional build. Every time I have built it, it has felt really good. I don't often feel the need to build it though, and so I don't put it up in this top kind of 3 category here, but I think it's hovering somewhere between occasional build and would at least consider. You know what? I'm going to change my mind on the flyer. I'm going to put it in I at least consider it. Trade routes are such a key component to so many Civ games that making your trade routes better is great. And your Tour de Belém's going on an ocean-based city, right? Yeah, it must be built on a coast adjacent to land in the harbor. So it's already going into a city with a harbor, which means you have extended trade route range. So you're going to have lots of trading options out of that city. I'm going to go and would at least consider for the Tour de Belém. University of Sancor, one of the most whatever wonders in the game. If you can get it, cool. If you can't get it, cool. When you do get it, it's fine. The requirements are weird. I think it is a nice use of a desert tile overall. I think this is like this is somewhere between might build for fun once and occasional build. It's not a bad wonder, but the amount of times I actually build it is almost none though. I'm going to put it down here. I think ability-wise, it's up here. I think how often you can actually build it, though, it's like would never build. And so I think it sits somewhere in here overall. Venetian Arsenal is terrible. I'd never build it. I never build it. I might build it for fun once, but even then, it's kind of whatever. The amount of games where I have built the Venetian Arsenal and went, oh, I'm so glad that I'm getting 2 boats every time I build a boat is so little that even when you do get it and it feels good, you probably already had the ability to build loads of boats anyway. The one thing I would say to give it some credit that might make me want to bump it up here on a later day is just that like you can build the boat in any city and still get the double boat. It doesn't need to be in the Venetian Arsenal city. I think with a naval game though, you're usually running up against resources. You're usually needing a big enough army to kind of back up the navy anyway. By the time you need a navy that big, it's helpful. You usually have planes, which just make the game easier and you don't need your navy anymore. I think it's just an awkward wonder, although its ability is really cool. All right, everybody, that is it. Here is my new kind of updated, upgraded wonder tier list. It'll be interesting to see what the differences were between this tier list and my last one. I did not look at the last one before I did this. I just remembered something. I know Machu Picchu, Oracle, and Pyramids were in the top tier here, the S tier. I'm not sure where everything else was, but it'll be interesting to see how my opinions have changed over time. If you have any further questions, comments, suggestions, if you want to get angry with me for my rankings, if you want to say, oh, VB, you're the best, these rankings are perfect, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Also, heavily encourage you to put in the comments what you think of these wonders when you build them, what tier you think they would go in, and all of that fun stuff. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, let us know what you thought in the comments, and we will see you in the next one. Also, sorry, don't forget to go to the description and check out the Twitch, the Discord, the live channel, all of that fun stuff. Goodbye!